What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About. Today, we are going to be talking about the wonderful, the ever-present, diabolical, internalized homophobia. I know what you're thinking. Woof. It is a heavy topic. That is why I'm recording this episode from my bed. That's right. I am in my sweats and a sweatshirt. I am under the blanket and I am in my bed all comfy and cozy because it is like 25 degrees outside and it's snowing again, and it's been a long week. When I say it's been a long week, it's been a good week. It's just been a long week in regards to recording this episode. It's Sunday night, and I post my podcasts I've decided I'm posting my podcasts on Mondays at 9 a.m. And here I am recording the episode. Hopefully this is the one that's going to make it. I think it will be. I feel it in my bones because I'm in my bed, and magical things happen when you're in your bed all nice and toasty warm. But I tried to record this episode previously on Friday night for maybe like 2.5 hours, and it was a hot ass mess. I could not get it right with the video and the audio. I just wasn't feeling it. I couldn't focus. I couldn't stay on topic. I just couldn't get my thoughts together. And, this is a topic that I take super seriously because I know that I'm not the only one that experiences these moments of internalized homophobia. I know that most gay people probably do. For other people, maybe gay people, maybe straight people that don't know what this is, I feel obligated, if I'm going to be discussing this topic, that I have to be providing top-notch information. I want to make sure that people are getting the correct facts and leave listening to this episode with more knowledge than they did when they started listening. So hopefully I do this justice. I am going to briefly talk about how internalized homophobia has come up in my life. I don't want to make it too much about me and my experience. I want this to be mainly just educational on what this is. But I think it would be important and beneficial to tie in real life examples to help explain better what this is and what this means. I really want to start with a really clear-cut definition of what internalized homophobia is. So I'm going to read a definition from a really great site. I guess it's more of a resource page on this site, and I will be sure to link all of the information that I'm using to speak about on this episode. I'm going to link all of the information in the show notes. And if you have any questions further than what I discuss and what I share, please feel free to DM me, text me, whatever. I'm always open to taking questions and explaining further. But yeah, okay. So let's just jump right in. And I'm going to read the definition, and then we'll work our way from there. So the definition: simply put, internalized homophobia happens when LGBTQ individuals are subjected to society's negative perceptions, intolerance, and stigmas towards LGBTQ people, and as a result, turn those ideas inward, believing they are true. It has been defined as the gay person's direction of negative social attitude toward the self, leading to a devaluation of the self and resultant internal conflicts and poor self-regard, or as the self-hatred that occurs as a result of being a socially stigmatized person. Woof. Okay, let's unpack this. Internalized homophobia is not a term that I can almost guarantee you any person that identifies with the LGBTQIA community really probably wants to talk about or even recognize is a part of our lives. Obviously, as being queer people, we try to, most of us, I know that I do, I try to exude a certain level of confidence and sureness of who I am and walking in my truth, as I like to say. But I would be lying if I said that I didn't have moments where other people's ideas and other people's thoughts of what is right and what is wrong, or ideas about homosexuality, those thoughts don't come into my head and kind of plague me sometimes, kind of dictate the choices that I make in any given situation. And the word internalized, it kind of suggests a weakness. If it's internalized, it means that it's something that we're not dealing with. We're not talking about it. We're not processing it. So that can be seen as a weakness. And homophobia, you're probably asking, Mikayla, how could a gay person or a queer person, how could they be homophobic? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. They are, a queer person. How could they be homophobic? I think it's important to acknowledge and realize that gay people can definitely be homophobic, and it results from the intolerance and the hatred and the negativity that we receive from the rest of the world. Most people, when they think of homophobia, they think of individual acts of violence against queer people, or spewing gay slurs, or telling people that they're gross or that they're going to hell or an abomination. And yeah, that all ties into it, and that's all very important. But I think when we start to look at the individuals and individual cases of homophobia and outward violent verbal homophobia, it kind of distracts and takes away from the real root of the problem, which is a system of oppression. It's a system that says the cis heterosexual individual, and in most cases the cis heterosexual white individual, is the right, is superior. It is the ideal. To be straight is the ideal. Anything else that steers away from that is seen as other or wrong. And this allows a system where heterosexuals can maintain dominance and privilege by enforcing the gender binary, marginalizing LGBTQ people, and really just continuing to find systematic ways to oppress people who identify as others. Okay, so it's not just individual acts. How does it affect us? Or, if there's this system, how does it affect us? Well, everybody's educated by this system. So in most cases, people that deal with homophobia or deal with hate or rejection that leads to internalized homophobia happens within our families, our communities, our religions, our friend groups. Any kind of rejection or hatred that we receive in return for coming out to people or sharing our sexual identities with people. Most of my experience with internalized homophobia, most of what I deal with, I think, relates directly to things that were said to me or taught to me by growing up in the church, going to a Christian school, obviously being surrounded by Christian people and friends and my family. It was a huge part of creating this rejection of myself. I believe I talked about this in my coming out story, but when you're constantly told that what you're doing is wrong, that what you're doing is gross, that you're an abomination, that gay people are going to hell, gay people are evil. The more that we're told this, the more that we start to believe it. We start to take it as fact and not just a hateful opinion. And this is where it starts to become internalized. This is where we start to experience homophobia not just towards ourselves, but towards other queer people. And like I said, most of this comes directly from people who are closest to us. This has a profound impact on how we deal with this. When it's coming from the people that are supposed to love you and support you and the people that you trust most, of course you're going to start to believe it, and of course it's going to start to internalize and penetrate deeper. So what does internalized homophobia look like? And how do I know if I suffer from it, or how do you know if you suffer from it? I mean, I think there are a lot of ways that internalized homophobia can show itself. I think one of the most common ways that you can tell if you are experiencing internalized homophobia, if you are exemplifying a lot of secretive and dishonest behavior. This can be anything from denying who we are, denying ourselves, the life that we want to live, or the people that we want to be with. And this can be aggressive, hateful behavior, or it can be more subtle of just not coming out or selectively coming out, lying to yourself about, your attraction to whoever it is that you're attracted to, engaging in secret relationships, or forcing others to keep secrets and remain in the closet with you, or telling people that you're gay but being like, don't tell anybody. When I was first coming out and when I was first experimenting with my sexuality in high school, I was in 2 secret relationships. And at that time, I was perfectly okay with it. And I can't help but think what led me to not be able to be honest with not only myself, but the people around me and my family around me definitely had to do with internalized homophobia. If I felt comfortable to just be myself and share my truth, I wouldn't have needed to keep it a secret. Me and this person wouldn't have needed to keep it a secret or felt like we had to keep it a secret or threatening each other if it wasn't kept a secret. The emotional havoc that secrecy and dishonesty can create for anybody, I mean, it can be a matter of life and death. It could be very detrimental and very harmful to individuals to not be able to speak truthfully or not be able to reveal who they really are or who they love without fear of rejection. Another example of manifestation of internalized homophobia is something called horizontal oppression. It can also be called lateral violence or horizontal hostility. Horizontal oppression is probably one of the most damaging results of internalized homophobia because it functions as a cycle of abuse. And it happens when an LGBTQIA person is subjected to homophobia, biphobia, heteronormativity, and they begin to discriminate against other LGBTQIA people. So therefore, it creates this perpetuation of heterosexism. So horizontal oppression can manifest as just about anything. Deeply closeted politicians or religious leaders or powerful people that lobby for legislation that take away from LGBTQIA rights or initiatives, feeling disgust towards other LGBT people who maybe don't express themselves in a heteronormative way, excessive judgment of other LGBT people, anger and resentment to people for being out or proud of their identity, transphobia, gender policing, shaming or harming individuals who do not fit into the gender binary, anger or embarrassment that other queer people represent you. There are a lot of ways that we can see horizontal oppression just in the world around us. People who are politicians or pastors or even athletes or rappers or whatever it is, people who stay closeted and call gay people slurs or attack gay people. But it really just has a lot to do with them being shameful of themselves and not having the courage to come out, so they take it out on other people. I mean, it's like the same in any other aspect of your life. If you want to be a filmmaker and you're lazy and you're not fucking doing anything, you're not grinding, you're not out there working, and you see someone out there who's working and they're being successful and they're getting all these opportunities, you could start to be jealous of them or resent them or hate them because they're doing what you want to do. I remember when I wasn't completely out of the closet yet, when I would see people who were out and proud and free, I was jealous of them. I wanted that. I wanted to be free and accepting of myself to where I wasn't afraid to be honest with the people around me. I mean, maybe at this point you're saying, well, it sounds like the easiest solution to prevent all of this is just for people to come out. While I think that coming out is a very freeing and a very unique experience to each individual who experiences coming out, it's not always that easy. I know people who have waited 50 years of their lives to come out of the closet. People fear rejection from their families, from their loved ones. You know, there's possibility of losing their homes or losing their jobs or being ostracized or excommunicated from their churches. Maybe it could lead to violence against them. I'm sure we've all heard stories of people who have come out to their parents and been kicked out or been physically abused or completely rejected by their families, to where the situation has left that person completely alone. So there are a lot of reasons why people don't want to come out or find it hard to come out or struggle to come out. It's not just always going to be a good experience for everybody. Every experience in coming out is different. It's unique to each individual person. And that's why I think that outing people is like the worst thing ever. Don't do that. That's not cool. I was outed by a couple people in like a few passive aggressive ways over the course of my life, or just in ways that made me feel like my experience and that part of my journey was not my own. And it made me feel like people kind of demanded to know my truth as opposed to me being able to tell them. So please always respect people and their process and their timing. And when they think it's right and when they think it's safe, they'll do it. I hope they'll do it. But other than that, it's not my job to tell anybody when they shouldn't come out, how they should come out. And the reason why it's so important is because outing people can also turn into more internalized homophobia. If someone's not ready to come out of the closet, or if they're not ready to share that bit of themselves with other people, it can be very harmful. Internalized homophobia can cause a lot of mental and physical health issues, anywhere from depression, anxiety, self-esteem issues, self-harm, suicide, substance abuse, eating disorders. I mean, there are some crazy statistics around suicide and the LGBTQ community, like this one. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people ages 10 to 24. LGB youth seriously contemplate suicide at least 3 times the rate of heterosexual youth. LGB youth are almost 5 times as likely to have attempted suicide compared to heterosexual youth. Of all the suicide attempts made by youth, LGB youth suicide attempts were almost 5 times as likely to require medical treatment than those of heterosexual youth. This is wild. And why do we think that queer people are attempting suicide at higher rates than heterosexual people? It goes back to the point of when people are constantly told that they're wrong, that they're sick, that they're an abomination, or whatever you want to say it is, when you're constantly told that what you're doing is wrong and that you don't belong, you start to believe it. And if you believe that there's something wrong with you, that you're sick, or that you're disturbed, or if you're demon possessed, like I've heard it called, being gay, I've heard someone say, if you are gay, you are demon possessed, which is insane. When people say things like this, it starts to make people hate themselves. And what do people that hate themselves do? They harm themselves. They harm others. They're not healthy individuals. I mean, I could literally speak on this forever. I mean, the simple power of our words and how when we speak life into our lives and other people's lives and situations, how positively impactful and influential that can be. And when you're constantly speaking negatively to people and hatefully to people and disrespectfully to people, it makes them feel terrible. And that's why this topic is so important. Most people like me who are experiencing internalized homophobia, some maybe not so much and some a lot, the longer that we're dealing with this negative influence, the worse it is. If you're getting this hate from the time that you're a small child and now you're in your 20s, 30s, that's like 30 years of trauma that now you're dealing with on top of trying to fit into a society that rejects you and doesn't want you. You're also getting this hate and negativity from your family and your friends and the people around you. How are people supposed to survive? How are people supposed to want to go on living? The mental and medical impacts that it can have on an individual. And there are many academic and medical studies that have linked the existence of internalized homophobia to other health issues and behaviors meant to punish or control the physical body, such as suicide, excessively risky sexual behavior, substance abuse, and eating disorders, particularly in those who are lacking the proper support structures, community, and coping mechanisms. When we go through something traumatic, or we feel rejected by people around us, or we feel unwanted or unloved, a lot of times maybe we don't know how to cope with it. We don't know how to talk about it. We don't know how to find the support that we need. And that can result in destructive behavior. I'm sure we've all heard stories of people exhibiting destructive behavior or going down destructive paths as a means to cope with what they're dealing with and what they're struggling with. How easy it would be to just come alongside people and let them know that they're okay. And even if you disagree with people or you disagree with their lifestyle, to just let people know that you love them and that they're loved and that they belong, and that no matter what they're experiencing or what they're going through, that they belong in this world. Some other effects of internalized homophobia: it can result in the inability to have intimacy or lack of intimacy in familial relationships, friendships, or romantic relationships. Internalized homophobia creates low self-esteem and a lack of confidence. And when people are feeling low about themselves and they're not feeling confident and they feel unworthy or they feel isolated, that blocks our inability to connect with people, to have emotionally intimate intellectual encounters, sexual encounters. It creates deep shame, whether it's about sexual experiences or just about who we are in general. There have been psychiatric studies that have shown that individuals with higher levels of internalized homophobia are less likely to be in intimate relationships. And when they are in relationships, they're more likely to report problems with their partners than people with lower levels of internalized homophobia. There are so many negative impacts of internalized homophobia, it literally makes my head spin. And these are things that I don't even really acknowledge on a daily basis. There are times where I'm out with Zaire or I'm out with my gay friends and we're in public settings, and maybe Zaire will try to be intimate with me or hold my hand or kiss me. Sometimes I am like, no, wait, stop. There are people around, but why do I do that? Why do I feel the need to stop myself? I mean, how many of you straight people out there have ever been in a social situation or a public situation where your significant other went and held your hand or kissed you and you were like, oh no, people are going to see, what are people going to think? It's probably pretty unlikely. Second guessing posting things on my social media, or second guessing what are these people that follow me going to think? Or and this is something that I've grown out of a lot. I think I've dealt with a lot of my internalized homophobia, but the sad truth about it is that for the most part, it will never go away. Once you've experienced that trauma of rejection and that trauma of people telling you that you're less than because of your sexuality, that sticks with you forever. No matter how hard you try to get rid of it, it's always going to be there. We just have to work every day to really talk it out and be vulnerable with people, conversate with other people, relate to other people who share our experiences. Listen, we got to take care of each other. A lot of queer people don't want to talk about this, don't want to talk about their issues with internalized homophobia, and I don't blame them. It's awful. It's an awful thing. Throughout this week, talking to people about this topic and about me recording this podcast, I was like, as a queer person, do you have any thoughts on internalized homophobia? And 9 times out of 10, the person that I asked would be like, ugh, like, can we talk about something happier? It's not a happy topic. No one really wants to talk about it or wants to have to deal with it, but it's something that I think we can slowly work to chisel away at and slowly work to change within ourselves and really reflect on the things that we say and do to each other that could really have lasting damage. Our words are powerful, and if we're speaking words of death and words of hate and not words of life over people and words of love, we're not doing what we can to contribute to the betterment of the world. So what are some of the negative impacts of internalized homophobia? Internalized homophobia can prevent us from leading fulfilling lives. It can keep us in a place of perpetual shame, stress, and anxiety. It can keep us from having close relationships with people or ruin the relationships we do have. It can lead us down a path of bitterness, anger, and loneliness. It can prevent us from coming out of the closet and allowing ourselves the opportunity to be seen and loved for who we are. It can prevent us from ever experiencing love with another person. It can contribute to long-term illness, mental health problems, substance abuse, and self-harm. So what are some of the negative impacts of internalized homophobia on others? Internalized homophobia, when left unchecked or unexamined, can harm people around the suffering individual. It can lead to judgmental and hurtful outbursts. It can break trust between friends and family. It can cause years of heartbreak and struggle with romantic relationships. It can lead people in positions of power to make decisions that harm other LGBTQ plus people on a large scale. It can provoke shame, anxiety, and stress and impact the health of others. Something I think that is kind of left out of the conversation about internalized homophobia is the impact that it has on the movement. And what do I mean by that? I mean the movement for equal rights. If we're internalizing this homophobia that is projected at us constantly, and we continue to believe that there is something wrong with us and that we don't belong, how do we continue to walk in our truth and fight for justice and fight to bring equal rights when we ourselves are questioning our validity? It takes the focus away from the main source of pain and struggle, which is heterosexism, enforced heteronormativity, homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia by keeping us short-sighted and fighting amongst ourselves. Yikes. When we're internalizing the homophobic things that have been said to us, it can cause us to resent others within our own community, to be hurtful or hateful towards others in our community, instead of working together against the common culprit, which is in reality is heteronormativity and this reinforcement of the gender binary of male and female and these gender roles and who we are as men and women and how we fit into society and what it's supposed to look like and what is normal. Normal is relative. What's normal to me is not normal to another person. There are a lot of things that are normal to a lot of people in the world that I think are not normal. Creating this blanket statement of this is what is normal, this is what is acceptable within society, and everything else is wrong and other, that rejection is dangerous. So I think it's really important for us to keep open minds and to think about individuals and individual struggle. Okay, so we know about what internalized homophobia is. We know what it looks like. We know how it comes about. But how do we overcome it? How do we work towards freeing ourselves of these thoughts and these rules that have been forced upon us in a society that values heterosexuality over anything else? I think the main thing that we have to do is really think critically. We need to be able to look within ourselves, look within our communities, but mainly within ourselves and try to find reasons or ways, like, how is this impacting my life, rather than, oh, I don't want to talk about this, or rejecting the idea of internalized homophobia. We really need to take a deeper look inside, and I believe that that is the key to freeing ourselves of these ideas. It's important to read. I learned so much in my research of this topic. I found a video that I'll link, that it was talking to these two psychiatric doctors in Nigeria, and this woman was interviewing them and asking them about internalized homophobia. That video taught me so much. Reading articles, listening to other podcasts, and listening to people talk about their experiences with internalized homophobia. And it really helped to open my eyes to see, like, this is an issue that needs to be discussed, and light needs to be shown on it, and it needs to be dealt with in a constructive way. I think it's really also important to build communities. Building networks of support for individuals and ourselves is essential to survival. The compassion of people within our community for other people, and compassion from straight allies, it can be healing. Other people who are at different stages in the process, they can offer valuable insight to younger generations. Everyone experienced their coming out and their realization and their movement towards their truth at different times. So, there's some people who are further along than others, and not to say that that takes away from anyone else's experience, but it's nice to have people who have gone through similar situations and who have experienced what we are going through or what we have gone through, to help give us insight and encourage us towards healing. I think it's very important for LGBTQ people to know our history, know the people who came before us and fought for the struggle and got us to where we're at. It was the trans women of color. They were the ones throwing the bricks at Stonewall. They were the ones that were fighting for our rights, fighting against harassment from police, fighting against this heteronormative system that oppresses queer people. And yeah, it's important for us to know our history. This is something I'm going to probably cover in another episode here pretty soon. We'll do like a deep dive into queer history, so tune in for that. But you should also do your own individual research. If you are a person who goes to therapy or has been thinking about going to therapy, first of all, don't feel bad about that. A lot of people go to therapy. A lot of people need it. I think 99.99999% of people could benefit from some therapy. But as a queer person, I think it's really important to find at least an LGBT positive therapist, whether that person is queer themselves or they're an ally. I think it's very important to find someone who recognizes your experience. I think it's really important to be getting counseling and support from someone who understands your experience. I think it's also really important to remove toxic influences from our lives, whether this is family members or religion or friends. This is important because it's not always so easy to just cut people out of our lives. But I said this in my last episode, in my coming out story, that if you have people in your life that are not benefiting you, and the majority of what they're projecting onto you or the way that they make you feel, if it's not good, you shouldn't have those people in your life. It's not worth it. It's not healthy. We're all just trying to do our best to protect ourselves and protect our peace. And so we have to remove these toxic influences from our lives. Some people deal with internalized homophobia within their churches and within their religious experiences. And sometimes this can lead to people leaving their churches in general. I think it's at least important to find a church that is affirming of who you are, accepts you for who you are, and isn't going to make you feel like you don't fit in or you don't belong or make you feel like an outsider. I also think it's really important to practice self-awareness. Be aware of negative reactions and judgments of yourselves, and really take the time to look inward and figure out, where are these coming from? What is the source of this? Why am I saying these things, or why am I feeling this way about myself, or why am I behaving this way? I think one of the most important human characteristics is having self-awareness and being able to realize the issues that we have and the things that we need to work on and the things that we need to improve on, and being able to realize our mistakes and correcting them. So self-awareness is very important in recognizing and dealing with internalized homophobia, because if we're saying that we don't have it or that we don't experience it, and we're not being aware that we all have it and we've all experienced it and we're all dealing with it, it can really add to issues that we have with ourselves or within our communities. So it's very important to be self-aware. Another way to overcome internalized homophobia, and this seems kind of obvious, but it's to come out. And like I said earlier, it's not always a good idea for people to come out. It's not always safe. But if you can do it safely, you should. I mean, there's nothing freer than admitting to yourself and admitting to the people around you that this is who you are, that you're proud of it, that it doesn't change you, it doesn't make you any less of a person. And of course, it has the potential to be painful. It can be scary, but if we get to the point where we feel comfortable to take that step, I think we should. This last part, I think I'll use this part to wrap up. Remember that internalized homophobia is not coming from inside you. You're not sick. You don't need to be cured. This was forced upon you in probably a suffocating and possibly violent way by our homophobic society. If you are experiencing internalized homophobia, or if you wonder about yourself, or if you're feeling guilty or shameful, really all we can do is just take the steps to free ourselves of this weight that's holding us down. It's like really easy to listen to these thoughts and let them penetrate and really let them affect us. But one day at a time, taking it step by step, eventually we will unlearn this. And hopefully eventually, as years progress, society will continue to evolve and people will stop bothering themselves with what other people are doing, or thinking that any choice or thing that anyone else is doing has anything to do with them. I will never understand what me being gay has to do with literally any other person on this planet. If I'm not harming you or I'm not hurting you, what does it have to do with anyone else? Nothing. People are so brainwashed by society and societal roles and religion to think that, oh, we have to fix people, we have to change people because they're wrong and they're lost. And no, we're not. People are just trying to live their lives the best way that they see fit. We're all just trying to survive. We're all just trying to find happiness. We're all just pursuing our own individual goals. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up because I could literally go on forever about this topic because it drives me fucking crazy. I just want to thank everyone for listening. Like I said earlier, if you have any additional questions, if you want to talk to me about specific cases with yourself or other people in relation to internalized homophobia, please feel free to reach out to connect with me. If you know me personally and you have my phone number, please text me, call me. And please, as always, if you know someone who is struggling with their sexual identity or coming out to their parents or their families, or anyone that just needs support or a listening ear, please let them know. And please always know that my channels are always open and available for anybody that needs anything. All right, well, thank you again for listening to this episode, and I think I'm going to call it a night now because it has been a long day and I'm tired. I hope you all have a fabulous week. I hope you're staying safe and healthy. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. I will catch you in the next one.